Halloween night, the town becomes even more bustling when children dress up as ghosts. The mysterious disappearance of Stacy Arras in Yosemite National Park. On July 25, 1981, 14-year-old Stacy Arras, her father, and a group of friends went on a camping trip to Yosemite National Park, one of the most famous places for its majestic natural beauty in the United States. This was a trip that Stacy had long awaited. An active and adventurous girl, she had always loved hiking and taking pictures of nature. The group's campsite was located at High Sierra Camps, a high, isolated area of the park near a small lake. The trip promised to be a memorable one, but no one in the group could have imagined that it would become one of the most mysterious disappearances in Yosemite history, haunting those involved for decades. After setting up camp and resting, Stacy decided to take a walk around the lake and take pictures. As she prepared to leave, she put on a light jacket, brought her camera, and insisted that she would return soon. Her father and the rest of the group did not feel anything was wrong, as the area was relatively safe and frequented by tourists. An older man in the group volunteered to walk with Stacy for a while. However, when he found the trail a little steeper and farther than expected, he turned back to the campsite to rest. Stacy continued walking toward the lake alone. That was the last anyone saw of her. When Stacy didn't return on time, no one was overly concerned at first. However, as the afternoon wore on and darkness began to settle over the forest, the group grew uneasy. A quick search was launched. They called out her name, searched along the trail leading to the lake, but there was no response. There were no footprints or any sign that Stacy had returned. When initial efforts failed, the group quickly alerted park rangers. A search team was immediately mobilized. They used dogs, helicopters, and dozens of volunteers to scour the surrounding area. However, Stacy seemed to have completely disappeared, as if she had never existed. One of the strangest things was the lack of any trace. If Stacy had gotten lost or had an accident, they would have found at least some clothing, a camera, or footprints. But the area she had been through seemed completely empty. Some believe she may have encountered a wild animal, such as a bear or a mountain lion. But searchers say there are no signs of an animal attack. Furthermore, even if she had been in danger, the 14-year-old would have screamed or left signs of a struggle, but nothing of the sort has been found. Another theory is that Stacy may have stumbled on the rugged terrain and fallen into the lake, but divers have searched the lake bottom thoroughly and found nothing, making the case even more puzzling. In the years since Stacy's disappearance, strange stories have surfaced. Several park visitors and employees have reported seeing the silhouette of a young girl in the mist in the area near where Stacy disappeared. Others have said they heard light footsteps in the woods, but when they turned around, no one was around. Several hunters and explorers have reported experiencing strange, unsettling feelings as if they were being watched while passing through the area. These incidents have led many to believe that Stacy's disappearance may be linked to unexplained supernatural phenomena. One of the most daring theories is that Stacy may have passed through a dimensional portal or reality warp, where she was whisked away to an alternate dimension that humans cannot access. While it may seem far-fetched, this theory is supported by similar disappearances in other national parks, where no trace of the victims has been found despite massive search efforts. Stacy's family never gave up hope of finding their daughter. They repeatedly contacted park officials and private search parties over the years, hoping to get information about Stacy. However, the case remained dark, with no clear leads. Questions remained. Where did Stacy go? Did someone or something take her? Despite numerous theories, from accidents to kidnappings to supernatural phenomena, none of them have been proven to fully explain the disappearance. Over time, Stacy Arras' disappearance has become one of Yosemite's greatest mysteries, haunting her family and those who have helped search for her. Stacy Arras' disappearance has not only devastated her family and friends, but has become one of the most disturbing and baffling stories in the history of America's national park system. Mysterious disappearances like this one continue to fuel fears that there may be forces beyond human understanding at work in these vast, wild forests. To this day, Stacy's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, and those who have heard her story wonder, is she still out there somewhere in another reality, beyond the reach of our world? The mysterious disappearance of Brandon Swanson, 2008. On the night of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson mysteriously disappeared while driving home to Marshall, Minnesota. Despite keeping in touch with his parents by phone shortly before his disappearance, Brandon left behind one of the most thrilling and terrifying missing persons cases in American history. To this day, no trace of him has been found, and what happened in the final moments of that call remains an unanswered question. Brandon had just completed his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. The night of the incident, he attended a party with friends to celebrate the end of the school year. After leaving the party around midnight, Brandon decided to drive from Canby to his home in Marshall, a distance of about 30 miles. At around 1:15 a.m., Brandon was driving down a dark suburban road. On the way back, his car slid into a ditch. Brandon tried to get out but was unsuccessful, forcing him to call his parents for help. Brandon told his parents that he was unhurt and out of danger, but that the car was stuck somewhere near the town of Lind, a few miles from Marshall. His parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, immediately drove out to pick him up. Brandon told them to stay straight on Route 68, where he believed he was. Throughout the call, Brandon kept describing his location, saying he saw town lights in the distance. But when his parents arrived at the area he described, they couldn't find Brandon or his car. Even though they were still on the phone, it seemed like Brandon and his parents were in two completely different places. Confused, Brandon decided to walk toward town while his parents drove in different directions to look for him. Brandon continued walking along the road, staying in contact with his parents by phone. He described that the lights of the town were getting closer, and he was sure that he was approaching a familiar intersection. However, his parents, who were driving around the described area, still did not see him. Then suddenly, at about 2 a.m., Brandon exclaimed, "Oh my God." His voice filled with panic, and the call was immediately disconnected. Brandon's parents tried calling him back several times afterward, but got no response. They drove around the area for several more hours, but could not find Brandon, and there was no sign of any accident. By morning, Brandon's parents had reported the incident to the police. A massive search was launched, with rescue workers, police officers, and even dogs tracking Brandon. They found his car deep in a ditch near the town of Taunton, nearly 20 miles from where Brandon had spoken on the phone. Strangely, the car was undamaged, and there was no sign that Brandon had been in an accident or had intentionally abandoned it. Search teams continued to follow the direction Brandon had described over the phone, but no footprints, clothing, or any personal items were found. The dogs tracked Brandon for a while, but suddenly lost the scent in the middle of the field, as if he had vanished into thin air. Brandon's disappearance has spawned many theories, but none of them are convincing enough to explain the whole incident. Here are some of the theories that have been put forward. One theory is that Brandon accidentally slipped and fell into a river or canal near the search area. However, the Yellow Medicine River was thoroughly searched and no bodies or clues were found. Many people wonder if Brandon really had an accident. Why didn't the search dogs detect anything? Some believe Brandon encountered something supernatural that night, perhaps a portal to another dimension or being taken away by an alien entity. Brandon's final words, "Oh my God," have led many to believe he saw something terrifying in his final moments. Another theory is that Brandon may have encountered a bad guy while walking. However, there is no evidence of a third person being in the area, and Brandon's phone was never used again after the last call. Even after all these years, Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of Minnesota's biggest mysteries. No new leads have been found, and police still consider the case an unsolved missing person case. Brandon's family continues to hold annual searches, hoping that one day they will find answers. But with each passing year, that hope fades. Brandon's disappearance has haunted the family and the community, leaving behind unanswered questions. What happened to Brandon that night? What did he see in his final moments? And why have all the search efforts been fruitless? The disappearance of Brandon Swanson remains a mystery, and every time the story is told, it sends shivers down the spine. Are there forces beyond human understanding at work in the wilds of Minnesota? The terrifying disappearance of Bryce Laspisa. Bryce Laspisa, 19, was a student living in Rocklin, California, studying graphic design at Sierra College. Bryce was known as a cheerful, outgoing guy, well liked by his friends and family. However, in late August 2013, his behavior suddenly changed, leading to one of the most gruesome missing persons cases in America that has yet to be solved. In the days before his disappearance, Bryce began behaving strangely. His friends and girlfriend noticed that he became depressed and began drinking heavily, although he was not a heavy drinker before. Bryce also admitted that he had been taking some stimulants, specifically Vivance, an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder a DHD, medication which kept him awake for days without sleep. On August 28th, Bryce suddenly announced that he was breaking up with his girlfriend without giving a clear reason, which shocked her. That evening, he called his mother and said he had an important conversation, but did not explain further. All of Bryce's behavior made his friends and family feel worried, but no one thought that something bad was coming. On August 29th, Bryce told his parents that he would drive from school in Rockland to his family home in Laguna Niguel, a trip of about 280 miles. However, his journey quickly became a series of mysterious and confusing events. At 11 p.m., Bryce called his mother from a location about 90 miles away, saying he would be home in a few hours, but he never did. Early the next morning, Bryce's parents discovered that he had slept in the car overnight near a convenience store in the town of Buttonwillow, hundreds of miles north of their home. When asked, Bryce did not explain why he did not continue driving. A local rescue worker helped Bryce refuel and said that he appeared calm and showed no signs of anything unusual. Bryce then continued driving, but stopped repeatedly along the way for unknown reasons. At around 2 a.m. on August 30th, Bryce drove through Castaic Lake, a large lake north of Los Angeles. This was the last time anyone saw him. Hours later, Bryce's car was found upside down on the shore of the lake, about 20 feet off the road. What made the incident even more bizarre was that the car door was wide open, and Bryce's bag, wallet, and phone were still inside. A laptop was also found, but there was no sign of an accident or injury. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle, and no sign that he had tried to call for help. Rescuers and police scoured the entire Castaic Lake area for weeks with helicopters, divers, and dogs, but there was no trace of Bryce. Here are some of the terrifying theories about his disappearance. Bryce disappeared? One theory is that Bryce deliberately disappeared due to a mental breakdown or the effects of alcohol and drugs. However, there is no evidence that he prepared for this, as all of his personal belongings were left in the car. If he deliberately left his life, why did he not leave a letter or message for his family? Supernatural phenomenon. Some believe that the area around Castaic Lake is associated with the paranormal. Many visitors and locals have reported feeling like they are being watched while passing through the area. Some have even reported hearing whispers or seeing shadowy figures on the shores of the lake. This theory suggests that Bryce may have encountered an entity on the night he disappeared. Has Bryce fallen into a mental state? Psychologists believe that Bryce may have fallen into an extreme mental state due to lack of sleep and drug use, causing him to become disoriented or hallucinate. But if so, where did he go? And why have no clues been found? The disappearance of Bryce Laspisa has become one of the most mysterious cases in American history. Despite extensive searches by his family and police over the years, no sign of Bryce has ever been found. To this day, he remains mysteriously missing, leaving many unanswered questions. Bryce's parents never gave up hope, believing that their son was still alive and out there somewhere. But with each passing year, that hope faded, and the case of Bryce Laspisa remained in the dark. becoming an unsolved obsession for all who knew this story. The story of Bryce Laspisa is not only haunting because of its strangeness, but also makes the listener feel uneasy about things that cannot be explained. Did Bryce encounter a supernatural phenomenon, or was he simply disoriented and lost forever? Only Bryce knows the truth, but unfortunately, he has disappeared from this world as if he had never existed. The mysterious disappearance of the Dyatlov group. On a cold February night in 1959, no one expected that 9 young explorers led by Igor Dyatlov would disappear forever in the Ural Mountains. They were all experienced mountaineers who had been through many harsh challenges before. However, this time, something invisible awaited them on the cold slopes, drawing them into a series of mysterious and terrifying events that have no explanation. On January 31st, the Dyatlovs set up camp at the foot of Otorten, preparing for the final ascent the following morning. They were all in high spirits, with no trace of anxiety in their personal diaries that were later found. But that night, something extraordinary happened, causing them to change their original plans. The next morning, the group did not descend into the valley as planned, but instead pitched their tents on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a wild and windy place. No one understood why they had chosen such a risky location. From that moment on, it was as if an invisible darkness had silently crept up, enveloping them, leading them on a journey of no return. The rescue team found the group's tent on February 26th. It was a chilling sight. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, and belongings, shoes, and even half-eaten food had been left behind, as if the group had fled in a panic. No one was wearing enough warm clothing, some only wearing pajamas, despite the temperature outside being as low as -30 degrees. Following footprints in the snow, the rescue team made their way down the hill and found the first 2 members under a tree, lying silently next to a dying fire. The 2 had apparently tried to light a fire to fight the cold, but all that remained were cold ashes and half-burned embers. They had no shoes and were wearing only flimsy clothing, completely unsuitable for the harsh weather. A more bizarre sight emerged. The branches above were broken, as if someone or something had climbed up, trying to escape some invisible threat. At the base of the trees, the snow was marked with deep claw marks, as if those people had tried in vain to cling to life. Not far away, the rescue team found 3 other members scattered in the snow, heading towards the tent. The tracks showed that they had tried to crawl back to the shelter, but all had collapsed along the way. Their faces were filled with absolute terror, as if they had seen something that did not belong to this world. Months later, as the snow began to melt, rescuers found the remaining 4 men in a deep ravine, buried under thick layers of ice and snow. The sight at the bottom of the ravine added to the strangeness of the incident. One man's skull was cracked. Several had broken ribs, but there were no external injuries large enough to explain internal injuries. Stranger still, their clothes were unusually radioactive, and one of them was missing a tongue. Something had happened to them. something that even seasoned veterans like them could not face or explain. Theories about natural phenomena such as low-frequency sounds and avalanches have been put forward, but none have been convincing. The nearby Manzi villagers say that the mountain is haunted by the spirits of those who have lost their way. They believe that those who accidentally trespass on the sacred site will be led into another world, where there is no concept of time or direction. Some of the rescuers later said that on the night of their search, they heard faint whispers in the wind, vague calls that sounded like human voices echoing across the desolate mountains. Sometimes they felt a cold gaze from behind, but when they turned around, there was only darkness. Years later, other climbers near the site of the incident also encountered strange phenomena. Some reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the snow, silent and indistinct, as if trying to find their way back from somewhere far away. The figures appeared for only a moment, then disappeared into the white mist. Some swear they have heard synchronized footsteps in the snow late at night, but no one else is on the mountain. On windy nights, faint moans can be heard from the ravine, like the desperate pleas of souls who cannot find a way out. To this day, the Dyatlov's disappearance remains one of the most chilling mysteries in the history of exploration. No one knows exactly what happened that fateful night. The area is now shrouded in silence, but beneath the thick snow, it is believed that the Dyatlov's final footprints remain, a reminder of a secret that has never been solved. Perhaps on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, an invisible door is still open, waiting for those who accidentally enter and never return. The Legend of Cropsey. Staten Island, New York, was once a peaceful community, but deep in its history lies a creepy legend about Cropsey, a mysterious figure who is said to stalk and kidnap children. Initially, the story of Cropsey was just a warning told by parents to remind their children not to stray too far from home or to stay out late at night. However, over time, the legend became more real than ever when it was associated with horrifying events that occurred in the Pains. The legend became more real than ever when it was associated with horrifying events that occurred in the 1970s and 1980s. Cropsey is described as a recluse who lives in the woods, hanging around abandoned facilities and off-road trails. Some say he is an escaped mental patient from a nearby hospital. Others say he was a former summer camp custodian who, after being fired, began wandering around Staten Island, becoming a nightmare for lost children. Legend has it that Cropsey would roam the streets at night, carrying an iron hook. He would suddenly appear from the shadows, abduct children, and take them into the woods or abandoned facilities where no one would ever find them. Many of the children were never seen again, and Cropsey's story haunted generations of people there. Things got even more terrifying when there were real disappearances that occurred in Staten Island in the 1970s. Many children in the area suddenly disappeared without a trace. Among them, the case of Jennifer Schweiger, a girl with Down syndrome, shocked the public. The family and police searched for her everywhere, and after days of searching, Jennifer's body was found in the abandoned grounds of Willowbrook Hospital, a notorious mental hospital that had been closed down due to its poor conditions and cruel treatment of patients. The series of disappearances and the discovery of Jennifer's body convinced the people of Staten Island that Cropsey was no longer a scare story. He had become a reality. The investigation led to the arrest of Andre Rand, a man who had worked on the Willowbrook Hospital grounds. Rand had a troubled past and had been accused of inappropriate behavior with children. Many believe that Rand was the reincarnation of Cropsey, a real predator, not just a myth. Rand was charged with the kidnapping and murder of Jennifer Schweiger. Although police were unable to prove that he was responsible for all the other disappearances, his presence in the area and the evidence collected led to Rand being sentenced to a lengthy prison sentence. Even with Rand in custody, Staten Islanders still aren't entirely at peace. The mysterious disappearances have never been solved, and many believe there are accomplices or others who continue to lurk in the shadows. Children and teenagers in the area are still warned by their parents not to wander too far, especially near abandoned areas or at night. The trees around Willowbrook Hospital still rustle in the night wind, as if carrying messages from victims who were never found. Even after the asylum was demolished, those who lived in the area still swear they sometimes see a figure lurking in the trees, a tall, thin figure walking slowly with a cold gaze as if searching for something. The legend of Cropsey is more than just a tale told to scare children. Andre Rand has been terrorizing Staten Island for years. But with the mystery still unsolved, there's no way to be sure the danger has passed. And if you ever see a shadowy stranger watching you from afar, it's best to leave quickly. There are shadows in this world that should not be touched, and legends like Cropseys are sometimes more than just the product of the imagination. They are a reminder that evil can indeed take human form. Freetown-Fall River State Forest, where the shadow never sleeps. Freetown-Fall River State Forest is located in the Bridgewater Triangle, one of the most famous areas in the world for paranormal phenomena. In addition to UFOs and Bigfoot sightings, the forest is also home to the spirits of the indigenous Wampanoag people and mysterious rituals performed by secretive sects. Those who have gone deep into the forest say that not everyone comes out with their minds intact. There is something in this forest, invisible yet ever present, that makes those who wander in feel watched, hunted, and sometimes drawn into some kind of demonic ritual where dark forces lurk and wait. This land has long belonged to the Wampanoag people, who consider it sacred. However, when Europeans arrived and took over the land, tensions and conflicts caused many Wampanoag to never find peace. Locals believe that the spirits of these warriors still roam the forest, protecting the land from intruders. Legend has it that if you hear distant drums or whispers in a strange language in the forest, do not stop or respond, for those sounds may be an invitation from the other world, pulling you into a space from which there is no escape. Since the 1980s, local police have discovered signs of pagan rituals in the forest. Stone circles have appeared deep in the woods with mysterious symbols carved into the rocks and surrounding trees. Burnt candles are scattered everywhere, and at some locations, signs of ritual sacrifice have been found, with objects damaged in ways that no one can explain. People living near the forest say they have heard strange chanting sounds coming from deep in the forest at night. Some have also seen figures in black cloaks standing motionless among the trees, watching them from a distance with cold, emotionless eyes. Many people who have entered the forest after experiencing these phenomena have never dared to return. One autumn night, Mark and Sarah decided to explore Freetown-Fall River to verify the legends they had heard. They took flashlights and some food and set off on a forest trail as the sun was just dipping below the horizon. At first, the trip seemed fun. The two laughed and talked, exploring the winding paths between the dense trees. But as night fell, things began to change. The forest became eerily silent. There was no more chirping of insects, only the sound of their own footsteps echoing on the dry leaves. Sarah began to feel that something was wrong. "Mark, do you feel like we're being watched?" Sarah whispered. Mark nodded. He could feel it too, as if invisible eyes were following them every step of the way. As they continued walking, light footsteps could be heard from behind. But every time Mark and Sarah stopped, the sound stopped. They both began to feel scared. "We have to get out of here," Mark said. They turned around and tried to find their way back. But strangely, all the roads seemed to disappear, giving way to narrow paths that led them deeper into the forest. Sarah began to panic, but Mark held her hand tightly, whispering, "We'll be okay. Don't panic." Suddenly, Sarah looked up and saw a ball of light hovering between the trees. It made no sound, but its flickering light was unnatural, like something was watching them from above. The ball of light moved smoothly, gliding through the branches as if it knew exactly where they were. "Run!" Mark shouted. They both dashed forward, but no matter how fast they ran, the light hovered above them as if it were toying with their fear. When they reached a clearing in the woods, Sarah saw a circle of stones with strange symbols carved into it. Within the circle stood a tall, dark figure standing still, unmoving. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness, and though it did not move, Sarah knew that it was guarding the exit. Mark pulled Sarah back, whispering, "Don't look at it. We have to go." They backed away slowly, trying to stay calm. The shadow didn't chase them, but the feeling of dread still clung to them, a reminder that they were intruding on something they didn't belong to. When they finally escaped the woods, Mark and Sarah were completely exhausted, but the feeling of safety did not return. Since that night, the two have continued to encounter strange phenomena. Sarah said that every night she heard light footsteps outside the window. Mark said that he saw strange lights flashing past their house, the same lights that had followed them through the woods. They both knew that, Even though they had left the forest, a part of that darkness still followed them, and it could return at any moment if they let themselves forget what they had experienced. If you intend to explore Freetown-Fall River, remember that not all mysteries are meant to be discovered. Don't stay after dark, and if you hear footsteps following you, don't look back. Go straight and never stop. There are things in these woods that never sleep, and once you catch their attention, you will never escape their sight. Great Smoky Mountains, the mystery of the Blue Mist Road. Hidden in the dense forests of Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains, Blue Mist Road is a road few dare travel at night. Along this path, many have reported chilling experience is mysterious apparitions that appear and disappear in the mist, whispers in the wind, and sudden chills that strike even on warm summer nights. Those who have wandered here have felt as if an invisible entity is following them every step of the way, never letting them escape its presence. Since ancient times, this area has been known for its mysterious stories. It is said that lonely souls wander here because of grievances that have never been cleared. Thick fog often covers Blue Mist Road, like a veil hiding another world where time no longer exists. Locals believe that if the fog suddenly comes, it means that the ghosts of those who have lost their way in the past are approaching. One autumn evening, Henry and Lisa, two adventurous people, decided to drive along the Blue Mist Road. Despite the many stories they had heard, they were more excited than scared. As they began to walk down the trail, a light mist settled like a thin veil over everything. Henry turned on his headlights, but the weak light only illuminated a few meters ahead. The air was strangely cold, despite the warm day. "Something feels wrong," Lisa said softly, as they continued down the winding trail. As they rounded a corner, Henry suddenly stopped the car. A figure slowly emerged from the thick fog in front of them. It was a man dressed in old clothes from the previous century. His face was hazy, as if covered by a layer of white mist. The man did not move, just stood there, staring straight at them with empty eyes. Henry stuck his head out the window, intending to ask if he needed help. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the figure disappeared into the mist as if it had never existed. Lisa held Henry's hand tightly, her voice trembling. "Did you see that?" Henry nodded, but he didn't say anything more. Both of them clearly felt that they were no longer alone. They decided to keep driving, but their initial excitement had turned to anxiety. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, swallowing the road ahead. Henry turned on the radio to break the tension, but all he heard was strange static, as if someone was whispering unintelligible words. "Turn off the radio," Lisa whispered, her voice choked with fear. Henry turned the switch, but the whispering continued, even though the radio had stopped. The voice wasn't theirs, it was coming from behind them, getting closer. The feeling of someone standing right behind them made them both freeze, not daring to turn around. Suddenly, in the distance, a pale blue light appeared, hovering between the trees. Lisa felt fascinated, as if the light was calling to her. "Maybe that's the way out," she said to Henry. her eyes glued to the light. Henry was unsure, but he didn't want to stay here any longer. The two decided to follow the light, but each step seemed to draw them deeper into the forest. The whispers became clearer, blending with the rustling of leaves. It felt like invisible figures were moving through the fog, leading them into a maze with no way out. They walked aimlessly, and the further they went, the farther the light became, like an unattainable mirage. They tried to turn back the way they came, but the path disappeared among the trees covered in mist. Lisa began to gasp, and Henry could clearly feel someone's cold breath on the back of his neck. He turned around, but there was no one. "We're going in circles," Lisa muttered, her voice choked with worry. As soon as she finished speaking, the pale blue light faded, leaving them in complete darkness and thick fog. They started running, their hearts pounding in their chests. Everything around them seemed to move. The whispers followed closely behind, and the darkness grew thicker. Suddenly, when they thought they would never find their way out again, they dashed into a clearing where their headlights were still shining, waiting in the mist. The two jumped into the car and sped off Blue Mist Road, not daring to look back. Only when they were out of the area did they dare to breathe a sigh of relief. But just when they thought they were safe, Lisa turned her head to look at the rearview mirror and froze. Amidst the mist that still clung to the back of the car, a blurry figure stood motionless, watching them from afar. From that night on, Henry and Lisa vowed never to return to the Blue Mist Road. They knew that what they encountered was more than just ordinary mist. Something in this forest, trapped souls, entities no longer of this world, still roamed, looking for lost people to drag them into the eternal darkness. If you intend to explore this road, think carefully. Do not stop when you encounter fog, and if you hear whispers, continue on without looking back. Because once the Blue Mist Road has recognized your presence, you will never walk alone again. Jersey Devil, Devil of the Pine Barrens. On a stormy night in 1735, in a dilapidated house deep in the Pine Barrens, a woman named Mother Leeds was in labor. The Leeds family lived in poverty in the woods, and her 12 children had worn her down. When she discovered she was pregnant for the 13th time, she was almost in despair. That night, as the pain of labor tore at her every breath, Mrs. Leeds cried out in rage, "I hope this child is a devil." Those harsh words echoed throughout the dark house, mingling with the roar of thunder outside. As soon as the child was born, an unprecedented horror occurred. At first, it was just a normal baby, weak, crying in the pouring rain. But a few minutes later, its body began to deform in a horrifying way. The child's flesh became rough and wrinkled. Its head stretched into a goat's, with sharp horns sprouting from its forehead. its tiny arms transformed into razor-sharp claws. Its tender back was torn open, revealing a pair of giant bat-like wings that flapped in the damp air. Its skinny legs curled into beast-like claws, and a long forked tail wriggled behind it. The creature let out a terrifying scream, a cross between a goat's bleat and a baby's cry. It stared at its mother with glowing red eyes, like a flame burning in the darkness. No one had time to react to the terrible transformation. The Jersey Devil, as it was later called, broke through the ceiling and rushed out, leaving Mother Leeds and her family screaming. A cold wind blew through the woods, carrying the monstrous creature with it. Neighbors later reported hearing the sound of wings flapping in the storm that night, and strange howls echoed through the woods for days afterward. The creature disappeared into the night, but its shadow haunted the Pine Barrens forever. Locals began reporting strange phenomena. They heard flapping wings on rooftops at night and heavy footsteps on roofs. Livestock disappeared, leaving only giant scratch marks on their barns. Whenever the Jersey Devil appeared, its terrifying scream tore through the night, causing everyone to close their doors and shiver in their homes. One winter night in 1800, Samuel Cooper, a local mailman, was riding his horse through the Pine Barrens. The night was pitch black, with only a faint moonlight illuminating the snow-covered road. Suddenly, Samuel heard a loud flapping of wings above him, as if something enormous was circling in the sky. His heart was pounding. Before his eyes, a strange creature slowly descended. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness. Its large bat-like wings flapped violently, causing the surrounding air to tremble. Samuel screamed in fear, abandoned his mailbag and horse, and ran for his life towards the nearest village. Samuel recounted that, in the final moments before fleeing, the Jersey Devil laughed a hoarse, twisted laugh, full of mockery, as if the creature were all too familiar with human fear. For years, farmers around the Pine Barrens had been finding their livestock missing. Early in the morning, they would find deep scratch marks on the barn doors and strange footprints in the mud. They weren't the prints of any animal they had ever seen sharp claws and small feet, but they appeared to walk on two legs. Several farmers swore they had seen a giant black shadow gliding across the night sky, its vast wings blotting out the moon. The late-night scratching at windows terrified the family, who dared not venture outside. Stories of the Jersey Devil continue to spread through the generations. Even in modern times, those who brave the Pine Barrens still claim to have seen the creature. Some explorers have reported hearing strange footsteps following them in the dark of night in the forest, but when they turned around, there was no one there. Others have said they have seen a pair of glowing red eyes staring at them from the bushes, then disappearing into the darkness. Whispers on the wind seem to carry a call from afar, making many feel as though something is watching their every move. On full moon nights, people in nearby villages swear that the Jersey Devil's eerie howls still echo through the trees and darkness, reminding them that the creature has never left the Pine Barrens. The Pine Barrens remain a wild forest today, with trails disappearing into the mist. Those brave enough to venture into the forest at night will sense a heavy atmosphere, as if the Pine Barrens holds a terrible secret. If you hear the sound of wings flapping or the faint scratching of a tree, don't turn around. The Jersey Devil is still there, waiting for those who stray into the woods and never come out. For in the darkness of the Pine Barrens, no one knows for sure what's watching from the bushes, and no one can guarantee that you'll return after encountering the Devil of the Woods. Devil's Tramping Ground, the Cursed Circle. Hidden deep in the North Carolina woods, Devil's Tramping Ground is a circular patch of land that has never seen any vegetation. No one knows why this desolate patch of land is so unusual. The 40-foot wide area is barren and barren, as if something burned the life out of it centuries ago. But it's not just the lifeless land that makes this place famous. Legend has it that at night, the devil walks around the circle, not allowing anything to stand in his way. Locals believe that anything left inside the circle will disappear without a trace the next morning. For centuries, the Devil's Tramping Ground has left those who enter feeling uneasy and fearful. Curious individuals who have attempted to spend the night in the circle have reported that their sleep was disturbed by strange noises in the wind and a feeling of being watched. Some have claimed that their personal belongings have disappeared without a trace, while others have felt as if something invisible was moving around them, making it impossible for them to stay long. Many locals avoid the area at night, believing that the entity in the circle is not something humans should encounter. Some elders in the area have said that whenever they try to set up camp near the circle, the next morning their belongings are moved to the edge or completely gone, as if someone had visited during the night. One summer evening, Tom and Eric, two adventurous young men, decided to test the legend. They brought tents and food, determined to spend the night right in the Devil's Tramping Ground to find out the truth. They laughed at the mysterious stories, thinking they were just legends to scare children. When they reached the spot, the sun was slowly setting behind the trees, giving way to darkness and the whisper of the wind. A circle of empty land appeared before them, barren and strange. Tom pitched his tent in the middle of the circle and challenged, "If the devil really walks here, we'll know by morning." As darkness fell, the air became eerily quiet. The wind still blew through the trees, but the circle of clearing remained motionless, as if it belonged to another world. Tom and Eric turned on their flashlights and sat around the small fire they had made, trying to dispel the eerie feeling. Time passed strangely slowly. As the night deepened, Tom began to feel a chill run down his spine. The darkness outside the circle seemed to thicken, and the wind whistled in an eerie, distant whisper. "Someone's watching us," Eric whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Tom tried to reassure his friend, but he felt uneasy himself. The fire in front of him flickered erratically, as if an invisible hand had brushed past it. Near midnight, as they both tried to fall asleep in the tent, They heard light footsteps moving through the circle. Tom jumped up, his heart pounding. The flashlight went on, but there was no one there, only a thick fog that surrounded the circle. "You heard something, didn't you?" Eric asked. Tom nodded, but didn't dare say anything more. As they listened in silence, the footsteps came again, this time more clearly, as if something was circling the tent, each step slow and sure. They lay quietly in the tent, neither daring to venture outside. They tried to push away their fear and sleep, but sleep never came. Near dawn, as the sky began to lighten, Tom and Eric opened the tent and looked around. Their packs were gone, and the fire was now only ashes, though it still burned brightly at midnight. Strangely enough, the circle of empty ground had no footprints other than their own, though they had both heard footsteps clearly throughout the night. The chill from the previous night still lingered in the air, and an invisible fear made them decide to leave quickly. On the way home, neither of them said a word to each other. They knew that what they had just experienced was inexplicable. When they returned, Tom checked his phone and found that all the photos taken in the circle had disappeared, leaving only a black screen like the darkness of the night before. Eric later recounted that, for the next week, he had frequent nightmares in which he found himself walking in circles, unable to escape, while something invisible kept whispering in his ear. The Devil's Tramping Ground is more than just a circle of empty dirt. Its darkness is alive, waiting for the curious. No one knows if demons actually roam here, but one thing is certain. Once you enter, you will never leave the same. If you plan to visit this place, remember not to leave anything in the circle and do not try to stay overnight. If you hear footsteps at night, stay calm and do not answer. Because once the circle recognizes you, the darkness will always follow you, no matter where you are.